Hello friend, I want to tell you about the Audi A8 car. While the Mercedes S-Class or BMW 7 Series impress with their appearance and you can tell right away that you're dealing with a top-of-the-range car, the Audi A8 has always been in their shadow. Of the three, it may be the best choice if you're looking for a cheap, luxury used car. Check out what to look for when buying. Audi offered the S8 model, a sports version of the A8, 2 years after its premiere. The competitors did not have that either. The power of the V8 engine was not the highest in the range, 340, and later 360 hydrogen phosphide, but the engine, lighter than the 6-liter, accelerated the car to 100 km per hour in 5.5 seconds. An interesting fact is that this model was standard equipped with a manual gearbox, and the automatic appeared only after the facelift and at an additional cost. The S8 can be admired in the film, Ronin. Let's return to the chassis for a moment before focusing on engine details. In the 2.8 and 3.7 petrol versions, as well as in the 2.5 TDI diesel, the drive was provided by the front wheels, with the Quattro system being an option. In the other versions, all-wheel drive was used. There were quite a few gearboxes. Manual was offered for the 2.8, S8 and 2.5 TDI. Only in the S8 before the facelift was the automatic available for an additional fee, while in the other versions automatic transmissions with 4 or 5 gears were used. Engines. From the very beginning, Audi offered only petrol engines 2.8 V6, 174 hydrogen phosphide, and 4.2 volts 8, 300 hydrogen phosphide, and a year after the presentation of the model, the range was joined by the 3.7 V8, 230 hydrogen phosphide. These three units underwent modifications of the heads from the 5-valve version per cylinder, which resulted in power increases to 193 hydrogen phosphide, 260 hydrogen phosphide, 310 hydrogen phosphide, respectively. In the meantime, the S8 was presented with a 4.2 engine with 340 hydrogen phosphide, which after changing the head generated 360 HP. The top petrol version was the W12 engine with a capacity of 6 liters and power of 420 HP. On the diesel side, customers didn't have much choice. Until 2000, only the flawed 2.5 TDI V6, 150 hydrogen phosphide, and its improved version with 180 HP were offered. It wasn't until the turn of the century and at the same time towards the end of production that the super modern 3.3 TDI V8 engine debuted, which has an output of 224 HP. The torque of 480 Nm was even greater than in the S8, whose engine generated 410 and later 430 Nm. According to the manufacturer's data, the diesel V8 offered relatively low fuel consumption, higher than the 2.5 TDI, but slightly lower than the facelifted 2.8 petrol. At the same time, it accelerated the car to 100 km per hour in 8.2 seconds, so better than the 2.5 TDI, and at a similar level to the facelifted 3.7 volts 8. Which engine to choose? Unfortunately, diesels, although they look promising on paper, are strongly discouraged. We have already written about the problems with the 2.5 TDI version many times, and here you can expect failures that end with replacing the engine, because repairs are not very cost-effective. The 3.3 TDI version, on the other hand, lasted only 3 years and ended its life. It is not popular, so there is a problem with parts, and also with opinions about this engine. There are few of them and they are not very flattering, and the knowledge of mechanics on the subject is negligible. The most common problem is the power supply system and what broke in the 2.5 TDI, i.e. the camshafts. It is worth knowing that there are 2 turbochargers to be regenerated, not 1. If we were to offer a diesel version, it would be the facelifted 2.5 TDI. However, this makes absolutely no sense, because petrol engines can be successfully operated on gas. Whether LPG in a luxury limousine looks better than diesel, we leave this question for you to decide. The fact is, however, that the ideal remains a not very powerful 2.8 engine, which not only tolerates driving on gas very well, but is also a popular design without any flaws. Since the company has not yet used turbocharging and direct injection in petrol versions, all units can be recommended. From the smallest 2.8 to the sports V8, which enjoys an impeccable reputation and considerable popularity. We advise you to pay attention only to the way the engines work and be sure to replace the entire timing drive after purchase. Unfortunately, this won't be a cheap operation on a V8, because the drive consists of a belt, chains and tensioners. The W12 version should be approached with great caution. It is not very common. It is not a popular engine, nor is it defective, but its repairs will certainly not be cheap. Besides, apart from purely image issues, there is nothing to argue in favor of choosing this version, unless you are looking for a nice young timer, although here too the choice between the S8 and the W12 remains up for discussion. In summary, we recommend the 2.8 V6 engine for everyday, economical driving, preferably on LPG. If you do not want to spend a few $100s in the first year after buying a car, this version is for you. You can even choose the front-wheel drive version with manual and simply enjoy a higher level of comfort and more space than in the A6 or A4 models. If you like the rumble of a V8 and a sense of power, we recommend version 4.2. We would like to point out right away that the S8 will not be much more expensive to run, and it has more class. Here, too, you can opt for a good quality gas installation and drive relatively cheaply. The 3.7 engine is an intermediate choice, which we recommend if you find a nice example with this unit. You should not count on lower operating costs compared to the 4.2. We generally do not recommend diesel versions, but if you must have something in diesel, look for the GEM 3.3 TDI with documented mileage, although a much safer choice will be the 2.5 TDI after facelift. Mechanics already know this engine well, and it will certainly be easier for them to repair it than the 3.3. The only real advantage of the V8 diesel unit is its sound and slightly better performance. What's broken? Special attention should be paid to the bodywork. Corrosion is alien to this model, so any trace of rust should arouse vigilance. A lot of cars came to the country after minor collisions, which are more difficult to repair in the case of aluminum skin. The truth is that repairing the Audi space frame is technologically impossible, although not impossible. The car will not provide an adequate level of safety, or even driving quality. This has its advantages, because the difficulties with repairs and their low profitability have partially eliminated the problem of cars that should not be driven on the roads. Any deviation in the geometry measurements should disqualify the viewed specimen. First of all, you have to reckon with the fact that the cars have very high mileage, often 400,000 kilometers and more, and therefore are worn out. The interior of the Audi A8 was made very well, and even today it should not be very worn out. However, you have to expect everything to break down. Although Audi was considered more unreliable than BMW and Mercedes a few years ago, it is still slightly cheaper to repair, and the overall durability is no different from that of its competitors. Tiptronic automatic transmissions are very well known in workshops repairing automatics, so there is no fear of being left out in the cold. Gearbox failures also occur in Mercedes. Changing the oil in the transmission has a great impact on its durability, so it is worth asking about this issue when buying a car. Compared to Mercedes and BMW, Audi has slightly more frequent failures of the electronics responsible for the car's equipment, and there is no shortage of them. There are no worries about the four-wheel drive. It is armored and it takes a lot of effort or great neglect to break it. Of course, you have to remember about oils. The suspension should not be a problem, although its durability is much lower than in, for example, the Mercedes W140. The multi-link construction made of aluminium will obviously not be cheap to repair. Is it worth buying? In our opinion, the potential for a young timer is definitely smaller than in the case of a BMW E38 or Mercedes W140, but on the other hand, it will be cheaper to repair. The Audi A8 is perfect for everyday use, which is hard to say about a Mercedes. It is cheaper to service than a BMW, so there is nothing to stop you from buying such a car. Our pick is definitely the S8 model. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.